This story takes place in the ancient kingdom of Puja, during a time when the Jewish people lived in exile under the rule of King Ahasuerus. Among them was a young and beautiful woman named Esther, who would one day rise to a position of great influence and courageously save her people from destruction. In the city of Shushan, King Ahasuerus held a magnificent banquet lasting 180 days, showcasing the wealth and splendor of his kingdom. At the end of this period, he hosted a 7-day feast for all the people. On the 7th day, filled with the spirit of wine, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to appear before him to display her beauty, but Queen Vashti refused. Following his advisor's advice, King Ahasuerus removed Queen Vashti from her position as queen. A search was conducted across the empire to find a beautiful young maiden to become the new queen. The young women were brought to the king's harem, under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the women. Among these women was Esther, an orphan who had been raised by her cousin Mordecai. Mordecai instructed Esther not to reveal her identity or her family background. After a year of beauty treatments, each young woman would go before King Ahasuerus. When Esther's turn came, she won the favor of everyone who saw her, including the king. King Ahasuerus was so impressed and charmed by Esther's beauty and character that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Esther kept her Jewish identity a secret, as Mordecai had advised. Meanwhile, Mordecai, who sat at the king's gate, overheard a plot to assassinate King Ahasuerus. Two of the king's officials, Bigthana and Teresh, conspired to kill the king. Mordecai told Queen Esther about the plot, and she reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. The matter was investigated and found to be true, and the two officials were hanged. An Agagite named Haman was elevated by King Ahasuerus to the highest position of authority, above all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman as the king had commanded. But Mordecai refused to bow down or pay him honor. Haman was filled with rage and sought to destroy not only Mordecai but all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the kingdom of Ahasuerus. To determine the most favorable day to carry out his plan, Haman cast lots, and it fell on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. Haman went to King Ahasuerus and said, "There is a certain people dispersed among the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury." The king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman to seal the decree. The decree went out by couriers to all the king's provinces, with the order to kill all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month. The city of Shushan was bewildered, but the king and Haman sat down to drink. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went into the city, crying out loudly and bitterly. There was great mourning among the Jews. Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai. She sent clothes for him to wear, but he refused them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend to her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai. Mordecai told him everything that had happened, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree that had been issued in Susa for their annihilation, to show to Esther, and to urge her to go into the king's presence, to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that any man or woman who approaches the king without being summoned must be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish, and who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Shushan, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. When King Ahasuerus saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand, sparing her life. What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you, he said. Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. During the banquet, the king again asked Esther what her request was. Esther invited the king and Haman to another banquet the next day, where she would reveal her petition. Haman went out that day joyful and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and noticed that Mordecai neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. When Haman got home that day, he called his friend and wife, boasting to them about his wealth and the ways King had honored him. And that's not all. I'm the only person Queen Esther has invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh and his friend said to him, Have a pole set up reaching 50 cubits high, and ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion brightened Haman, and he has the pole set up. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, who had conspired to assassinate King Ahasuerus. What honor has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The next morning Haman entered the court to request Mordecai's execution. Before Haman could speak, the king asked, What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman suggested a royal rope the king has worn, a horse the king had driven with a royal script. Then let the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them roll the man king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the cities, proclaiming, This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor, assuming the king meant him. The king commanded Haman to honor Mordecai in this way. After parading Mordecai, Haman rushed home in grief, only to be summoned to Esther's second banquet. During the banquet, King Ahasuerus asked Esther her request again. Queen Esther answered and said,
If I have found favor in your majesty's sight, and if it pleases you, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed.
King Ahasuerus asked, Who is he? Where is he? And Esther answered,
It is this vile Haman.
Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in rage and went out into the palace garden. Haman stepped close to the queen to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned, Haman had fallen on the couch where Esther was sitting. The king exclaimed, Will he even harm the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said, A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai. The king said, Hang him on it. So they took Haman and impaled him on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. After that, the king's fury subsided. That same day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther Haman's estate, and Mordecai came into the king's presence, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king. Falling at his feet, she begged him to put an end to Haman's evil plan. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she stood before him.
"If it pleases the king,"
she said,
"and if he regards me with favor, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman devised to ruin the Jews. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people?"
King Ahasuerus replied, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther. Now write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews, as it seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." At once, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out all of Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the nobles of the 127 provinces. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers. The king's edict granted the Jews the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy any armed force that might attack them. The day appointed for this was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. The couriers went out and spread the king's command. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe. The city of Susa held a joyous celebration, and for the Jews it was a time of joy, happiness, honor, and gladness. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the edict was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but the tables turned, and the Jews got the upper hand. The Jews assembled in the cities and attacked those who sought to destroy them. No one could stand against them, for the fear of the Jews had seized all the people. In the city of Susa, the Jews killed 500 men. They also killed the 10 sons of Haman, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. The number of those killed in the city of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the city of Susa. Now what is your petition? It will be given you." Esther answered, "Give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on poles." So the king commanded that this be done. Meanwhile, the Jews in the king's provinces assembled to protect themselves and got relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, urging them to celebrate the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time the Jews got relief from their enemies. He instructed them to observe these days as days of feasting, merriment, and joy, giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. The Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. Therefore, these days were called Purim. The Jews took it upon themselves to establish this custom for themselves and their descendants, that without fail these 2 days should be observed every year. The days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory die out among their descendants. King Ahasuerus imposed tribute throughout the empire. All his acts of power and might, together with the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, are written in the annals of the kings of Media and Persia. Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and was held in high esteem by his fellow Jews because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. Esther's life is a powerful testament to courage and faith. Her wisdom and bravery, in the face of great danger, saved her people and left a lasting legacy of hope and deliverance. Through her story, we are reminded of the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it requires great personal risk.